Happy Friday. Me and my buddy Sterling here are hanging out in the living room, and I think he's a little cold. Are you cold, baby? What's your matter? What's your matter? This is Sterling, guys. I haven't introduced you guys on the channel yet. He's my adorable adopted baby. We got him from the Humane Society about 1.5 years ago, and best decision I've ever made. Right, best decision, yes. He is my cuddle buddy every time I'm creating art. So, yes, today I wanted to do a YouTube tutorial video, but I'll get to that in a minute. Let's just sit down and have a little chat. I am drinking a warm cup of coffee because I dressed like this today. I dressed in a summer dress on a cold, foggy fall morning. Why? Because I blame Alexa. I don't know if she's listening to me right now. Yes, I asked her last night before I went to bed. I said, what temperature is it going to be when I wake up in the morning? And she told me 75 degrees. 75 degrees. To myself, I thought, oh, wow, that's great. Like, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to dress in a cute dress and I'm going to go for a walk and it's going to be great. I don't have to hassle with jackets in the morning or anything like that. I was feeling good. I went to bed feeling pretty happy about that. Well, when I got up and took Brandon to the bus stop this morning and took a little walk over there, I realized that it's freezing outside and it's foggy and it's wet and damp, and that makes it even colder. Like, it's not blistering cold or anything. I mean, we live in Texas, so it's not that cold, but it wasn't this warm, I guess. I don't know how to explain it. Like, it wasn't appropriate. This outfit wasn't appropriate for the temperature outside. So I regretted my decision. Went for a long walk, came back freezing, and now I'm enjoying holding this warm cup of coffee. I think I'm holding it more than I'm drinking it. So, sippy sippy. Where are you going, Sterling? I think he wants some coffee or snuggles. I think he's cold. Okay, good boy. What are you doing, silly? Yeah, so today we're just gonna hang out in the living room and do a little iPad tutorial for you guys. Since I went for that walk, I was noticing all the beautiful fall colors in the trees and the fog and everything, and I just had this inspiration for drawing or more like painting like a fall forest. And so I thought I would do that little tutorial for you guys since I have a little bit of free time today. And he is chewing on me. Oh God. What are you doing? I swear, he's like calm, and then when I start recording, he's just like, look at that. Like, I feel like he's gonna knock my camera down. He's getting all hyper. So I guess we better get to the tutorial. I wanted to do a real quick shout out to Calvin at Drifter Studio. I'm gonna be mostly using his watercolor brushes today. His watercolor brushes are like amazing, guys, so I'm gonna leave a link down below for you to check him out, check out his store, and purchase the brushes. I totally recommend them. So let's get to work. Okay guys, let's get to work. I have a watercolor stack right here where I have 2 beautiful watercolor papers by Calvin at Drifter Studio. And I think today I am going to use the basic watercolor one. And it starts out with this pretty little drawing on it, but I'm gonna make a new layer and delete that one because that's not my artwork, that is Calvin's artwork. Okay, so I'm gonna start out with this orangey brown color. And I'm going to select from the brush kit let me see, I can never find anything on here when I'm looking for it. We're coming over here to this brush set, and I'm gonna use the abstract round brush. It kind of, let's see, what size? About 70–80%. And I'm coming here and I'm gonna do the ground here. Doesn't have to be perfect. I like to kind of add in some random colors and then come back with my water blender brush and just kind of give it some, whoops, try not to go over the edge, like where the sharpness disappears. So just kind of lightly brush it on there to give it some interesting texture. And if we happen to go over, like right here, it's kind of blurry, we can just use the same, well, let's go to the abstract ground and go to, hold this and it'll erase with the current brush, and we can just come over here and kind of sharpen that up a little bit. Let's make the size bigger. There we go. And there's our ground layer, and then we want to come and make a new layer and put it underneath that for the background of the trees. And for that, I'm going to use this fine liner pen. Sorry for the noise in the background, guys. That is my clock. So I'm gonna choose this dark brown, almost black color. And the size is a little off. I'm gonna kind of make it the size of a tree and kind of, and see how it's kind of transparent in the back. So we can mask that off later. And I kind of let up with the pressure at the very end to give it that branchy look. And these are just trees that are going to be kind of in the background. Kind of like to press hard at the bottom and then kind of lighten up at the top. And trees are not perfect, so just kind of get creative with it, whatever feels right to you. Okay, and I think that that's good for the trees in the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm gonna get my eraser and I'm gonna turn my canvas sideways, and I'm going to erase this area right here where it overlaps, because we want these trees to look like they're in the background. If you don't really like the color of that layer, you make sure your layer for the trees is selected, and you can come to hue, saturation, and brightness, go to layer, and you can brighten it up or darken it to whichever you to whatever you prefer. And I'm gonna lighten it up just a tad. And then I'm gonna come back in and create a new layer and put it on top of our ground layer. And I think I'm going to leave the dark color brown here, and I'm going to make, this time my trees, whoops, I don't know what happened there. I'm gonna make my trees a little bit thicker, so I'm using it on 100% right here. Because I want my tree to look like it's in front. That one's a little too big. I don't like that one. I'm gonna take that off. I want to save room in the middle area because I'm gonna add some pumpkins there. I'm gonna kind of fix that at the base right there. And I think I'm going to change the hue, saturation and brightness on this one too. I want it to be a little bit darker than the trees in the back, but not as dark as I had it. There we go. Then what I'm going to do is I'm gonna alpha lock this layer. And I'm gonna come in, I'm gonna make my fine liner. I'm using the fine liner pen. I'm gonna make it a little bit smaller. And then I'm gonna go in with a lighter color. Sometimes you have to test it. And, whoops. What is going on here? Maybe, you know what? We're gonna use the HB pencil. Lighten up our pen. It is still too dark. What is going on? There we go. Okay, sorry guys. Some technical difficulties. Sometimes I'm still learning how to use this. Okay. So we're gonna add in, I think that's a little bit too thin. We're gonna add in some of these little designs here. I took the alpha lock off because I was trying to figure out what was going on. Okay. The alpha lock is basically going to prevent you from going outside of that tree, as you can see right there. So, make sure alpha lock is on. We're going to draw in some of these little details of the tree to just give it a little more of an interesting look and some texture. You don't have to go all the way to the top if you don't want to. I just kind of eyeball it and see what I like. And you got to be careful around like where the branches divide, because you want to give it that appearance of the branches like separating. So the curve of your brush kind of matters. Okay, I think that's good for this tree. Maybe I'll kind of fix it up a little bit over here. Okay, and then we're going to start working on this tree right here. Some of them are thin and some of them are thick. Just want to add a nice variety. These colors are kind of making me hungry, y'all. It looks like Reese's peanut butter cups. That's how you know you're hungry. I'm like looking at the colors and I'm like not thinking fall, I'm thinking Reese's peanut butter cups. Just doing it a little bit more sparingly as I get to the top. Don't need as much detail up there because we're going to be covering that with leaves in a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing here. Whoops, you know what I didn't do? I was supposed to mask that on a different layer. That would have worked better. Let's change the hue, saturation, and brightness just a tad. And make it just a little bit darker. Okay. then we're gonna do the same thing to this layer, except for I'm gonna do it the way I should have done it on the first one, where I'm going to create a new layer. I'm gonna alpha lock that one, 2 fingers sliding to the right will alpha lock it, or you can click on it and choose alpha lock. And then I'm going to do a clipping mask, which is basically going to only allow me to draw, but then it gives me the option to adjust just this layer. And I should have done that for this layer, but I forgot. So we'll do it on this one. Make sure you're on that clipping mask layer. And we're gonna go and do the same thing to the trees in the background. Okay, and what I couldn't do on the last one was I wanted to change the hue, saturation, and brightness for, you see how it changes the lines only and not the tree? That's what that clipping mask does, because it's on a separate layer. And that really helps versus what I did on this one. That's like a common mistake and something to keep in mind. Whoops, sorry, shaking the camera. Okay, back to our clipping mask layer and our hue, saturation, and brightness. I'm gonna mess with the brightness a little bit, and I wanna bring it down just a tad because these trees are in the background. And I might try doing a Gaussian blur. This kind of just, you can see how it blurs it a little bit. Just to give it that illusion that it's in the background. Alrighty, now we can work on our leaves. For our leaves, let's see, what would be a good brush for our leaves? I think I'm gonna use this Aurora Quill brush. And I'm gonna use like a dark autumny color. Let me check to make sure this is the right brush. Whoop. Most importantly, guys, create a new layer on top. I accidentally, there we go. You can see right here, I painted some green on there. So let's just erase that. There, it's gone. Okay, we wanna go to our top layer here and we wanna test our brush. See how it changes colors? That's what the Aurora Quill brush is perfect for. So it's gonna make it look like fall leaves. We wanna change our brush size to be a little bit smaller. And then we're gonna come in and start painting our leaves. Might be a little bit bigger. I'm using 35%. And we're just gonna come in and paint on top of the branches. the harder you press, the bigger the brush will get. So it's nice to have a nice deviation between small and big. And this color right here, this brownish color, is perfect because it gives off that greenish tint when you press a little bit harder. So the lighter you press, the more orangey it is, the more brown it is. And then the harder you press, the more green it is. So it gives you that good variety. It's perfect for making leaves. I also wanted you guys to keep in mind that we are going to be moving this layer to the back. So we are basically simulating the leaves on the back trees, the ones that are in the background. So keep that in mind when you're painting. I'll show you an example right now. So you see how it's overlapping right here for that background tree? It doesn't give the illusion that it's in the background, so we're going to move it to above the background trees. But we want to take off the alpha log and take off the clipping mask, sorry. There we go. So now it gives that illusion that it's behind because this tree's in front. And we can just continue painting so that way the trees that are in the foreground won't be covered up by the leaves in the background. Do some light dots here to give it more brown. In some instances, like right here, we don't want the branches to be so covered up in the front. So you could even go ahead and create a new layer and drag it behind those branches so it'll show up behind the tree branches. So you don't completely cover them up. And I think that kind of looks good already for, I'm gonna make sure that I add in a few light spots or some more browns since it is fall. But some of the leaves are still green, so we wanna leave some of them green still. Make sure you fill in all the white spots that you see missing. I mean, you can have a few here and there because you do want it to look like leaves. The light does filter through. But some spots that are like right there, we'll go ahead and cover up. And then we're going to go onto this layer and create a new layer in the back. No, we're gonna actually leave it on top, never mind, excuse me. We're going to leave it on the top and we're gonna start creating some leaves to cover up some of these tips of the branches, but you don't wanna cover it up too much because you still want some of the branches to show. You just don't want it to be so obvious where the branches are. You want your branches to look full and pretty. And I think that's about done for the leaves. Now we want to go ahead and create a new layer and we're going to move it all the way to the bottom because this is going to be our background layer For the background layer, we're going to use the abstract round brush again, and we're going to do a pretty blue, pretty light, and I'm going to use the biggest brush setting, 100%. And we're going to paint, but we're going to lift our brush up to create those streaks, if you saw before. See how it's darker and lighter? So that kind of gives the appearance of like a nice, pretty painted texture. So I'm lifting my brush up in a sweeping motion. And once again, it does overlap right here, so you can select your eraser and just kind of erase that off the bottom there because it does overlap. Just be careful not to erase it too much, or you'll erase the background. And then we're going to get our watercolor blender brush, water blender, and we're going to just smear it out in certain places, but we want it to have that really pretty watery texture with the different colors. So it looks like we kind of just watercolor splashed this on. Be careful to get in all the places that have the white. Here we go. And that looks pretty good. If you would like, you can come to the hue, saturation, and brightness and select layer, and you can brighten it or darken it depending on what you like. And I'm gonna go ahead and lighten it just a tad. And I'm gonna go a step further, and I'm gonna use my selection tool set at freehand, and I'm going to just create like a random selection here. I'm gonna feather it, and I'm gonna change the hue, saturation, and brightness to a pinkish purpley color and kind of darken it just a tad, or maybe lighten it a little bit and saturate it a little bit. And that kind of just creates a little bit more of an interesting look. Okay, and our next step is going to be painting in a pumpkin. So for this, we're going to select our top layer and create a new layer. We want this one to be on the very top of everything. And we are going to sketch a pumpkin. I'm gonna use the 6B pencil, and I'm gonna select this orangey color, probably a darker orange, maybe almost a brown. I'm gonna come kind of sketch in. I'm gonna make my brush a little bit bigger. It's not crucial because we are going to just paint over this. And we're gonna kind of create our basic pumpkin shape. It doesn't have to be perfect. Kind of just tweak it to what you want it to look like. Okay, and we're going to use that as an example. So let's create a new layer and put it underneath and turn the opacity down on that sketch layer so we can just see the outline of it. And I'm going to use these free pumpkin brush kits, brushes from Calvin at Drifter Studio. And I'm going to select the pumpkin wash brush, and I'm going to use this orange color. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to basically trace the outline of my sketch here. I'm just going to paint it in with these different colors. It's similar to the quill brush, the Aurora quill, because it kind of adds that interesting color texture. And then I'm going to trace over. I'm going to use the selection tool, freehand, and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to trace my pumpkin sketch. And I'm going to go to copy and paste, and it's basically going to cut out my pumpkin. So if I turn off that layer and I turn off that layer, it gives me that basic outline. So I'll go ahead and delete those two layers. And it's not perfect, so I'm going to use my eraser tool. And I'm gonna set it to calligraphy monoline. Turn the brush down to 6%, and I'm going to outline it to kind of sharpen it up. Actually, I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger, 21%. I'm gonna sharpen up my pumpkin a little bit because there's these extra pieces that are a little bit rough around the corners, and I don't want it to look too rough. Like a little bit of roughness is okay, but you don't want it to be super jaggedy. Okay, and that's looking good. And we're going to alpha lock this pumpkin layer. We're gonna darken the color just a tad, and we're going to click on this shadow fade brush. And this is like a really cool brush. He has a really good pumpkin drawing tutorial. You guys definitely go check it out. That's where I'm getting this technique from. Okay, so as you can see, it has like this nice shadow fade. So I'm gonna make it smaller, and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to paint on my lines. Now, depending on which way, from up or down, it'll depend on where the lines or the shadows go. So since I'm gonna want to shadow like on this side, go with it that way, and then change it as the pumpkin rounds out. And there we go, there's our pumpkin. And then we want to create a new layer and put it behind the pumpkin to make a stem. And we're gonna use Calvin's pumpkin stem liner brush with a darker brown color. Oops, brush is a little bit too big. And we're going to make this adorable little stem come out of our pumpkin. And I'm gonna go ahead and merge those two together. And I'm going to go to hue, saturation, and brightness and kind of tweak my pumpkin just a little bit. Turn down the saturation just a tad. And change the color just a little bit to get it just the way I want it. This is all personal preference, you guys. And I want to create a layer underneath to make the shadow of the pumpkin. And for that, I'm just going to use an airbrush that comes with Procreate. I'm gonna use a soft airbrush, and I'm gonna choose this dark color here. We wanna make sure that the layer is underneath the pumpkin. And we're gonna come in and create this little shadow. You know what? I think we're gonna go with a darker color than the background. So if you hold the background and select the color, and then kind of go down a little bit, that makes it more realistic of a shadow. And then we can get a bigger airbrush, the soft brush, and make it big, and then kind of come in here and lightly shade where the top of the pumpkin would be. Then I'm going to, as a final step, I'm going to lower the opacity, or maybe change it to multiply, and lower the opacity just a tad. And then I'm going to go to Gaussian blur and kind of blur it out just a tad so it's not so harsh. And there is our pumpkin. And this is totally an optional step. Like, now that I have everything the way that I want it, I'm going to go ahead and merge everything together just to clean it up. And I'm going to create a new layer on top of everything, and I'm going to select a dark color black, probably the blackest I can, just for now. I might go back and change it in a little bit. And I'm going to choose this, let's see, calligraphy brush. I'm gonna select the brush pin. And I'm gonna kind of play around with it. I'm gonna write the word November at the top. And sometimes we run out of room here. You can move it over. I have a bad habit of changing. See, I don't like the way that looks because my handwriting has a bad habit of being like really small, and then I just get bigger and bigger as I go. So let's just go ahead and redo that. I'll try to keep it, you know, sometimes turning the grid on actually helps. So if you come to Canvas and Drawing Guide, Edit Drawing Guide, we're going to use the 2D grid, and I'm going to turn up the grid size a little bit. And that way it kind of helps me stay on a line. Now we can go ahead and turn off the drawing guide. See, that really does help, comes in handy. So now we can kind of move this around and center it. You can see that orange line comes up when it's centered. Here we go. And we can kind of see what it looks like in the full picture. And I can go to, maybe if I go to hue, saturation, and brightness, I might actually like the way this looks like in white. So you can change it if you would like, but I think I'm going to leave it dark. And I think I'm going to add just a little bit of a highlight using my monoline brush, and then like choosing like a lighter shade here. I think I'm gonna come in here with a kind of big size, and nope, you know what? The monoline brush is too harsh. Let's try an airbrush at a small size. Whoop, too small. Try a little bit bigger. Oh, we want to make sure to alpha lock that. Whoops, I turned it off. Make sure it's on alpha lock so you don't get anything on the outside of this. You kind of have to play around with the brush size. So the brush size I'm using right now is 15%. I just want to add kind of a little bit of a highlight on the top parts of this lettering. Just like that. And if you really wanted to, you could play around with it. You could duplicate that layer, and then you could turn the top layer off just temporarily, come to hue, saturation, and brightness, and brighten that up. Turn your other layer back on, but stay on the bottom white layer, and you can like move it around and give it that drop shadow. And then we'll just go ahead and look at this in full view. Oops. That is what your finished product will look like. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. Hit the subscribe button below and hit the bell for more notifications. If you want to see more videos like this, please, leave a comment of what you would like to see, or just some encouragement, because sometimes it gets a little bit discouraging if nobody watches your videos or if nobody gives you any feedback. I enjoy doing this. This is something that gives me that creative release, and I hope you guys enjoy watching it as much as I enjoy making these videos. So let me know in the comments, and I will see you next time. Take care. Have a happy Friday.